the war in the Middle East is somehow getting to the next level. One, Donald Trump on somehow is coming out talking about negotiations, some sort of. We had a report on CNN telling us that the United States is trying to talk with Iranians through, Turks, Pakistanis, Omanis, and they're doing, everything possible to reach Iranians. And here is what Donald Trump said just moments ago about what's going on.
Great. The border is great. The military is great. We're having, by the way, a tremendous success, as you know, in Iran. We had one in Venezuela, and now we're having one in Iran. They have no Navy left. They have no Air Force left. They have no anti-aircraft equipment left, no radar left, no leaders left. The leaders are all gone. Nobody knows who to talk to. But we're actually talking to the right people, and they want to make a deal so badly. You have no idea how badly they want to make a deal. And we'll see what happens. I want to thank Pete Hegseth. The job you're doing over there is really incredible. You and the general and all of the other generals and colonels and captains and majors and everybody else, right? It's a perfect, amazing thing. We make the best military equipment in the world. Now we're going to make it faster. We want to get it faster, but we make the best in the world. We're doing a job.
Yeah, I think the points that he has mentioned, Patrick, what has happened? Something in the tone of Donald, in the tone in Washington, the way that they're talking about the war has changed since Iran hit the Mono. And the Israeli defense system is just seemed. Yesterday I talked with Professor Ted Postel. He said that they don't have any air defense system left in the country to defend Israel. That's a huge, huge factor to be considered in the calculation on the part of Washington and Israel. What is your understanding of these new rhetorics going around?
Yeah, it's good that you pointed to this. I do a lot of dialogue analysis and try to break down and analyze the dialogue, and also look at the tone, the psychology behind it. And it seems to me Trump is taking it's type of an evasive. He's taking evasive action right now. He's trying to create a narrative of victory now, like we've achieved so much. He's repeating all of these sort of boilerplate talking points. So we've got rid of their Navy, we've got rid of their Air Force, we've killed all their leaders. It's a great success. Like, just on his side, just for a president of the United States, trumpeting great success by the level in which he's tried to destroy or has destroyed another country is just quite disgusting. But let's just put that aside for the moment. Let's read into what he was saying there. And he's basically saying that there's no leaders. We don't know who to talk to. I've heard this before. I can't remember who says this all the time. I know it's Benjamin Netanyahu. This is the Israeli tactic. Oh, we want to negotiate, but there's nobody to talk to. All they're all terrorists, and we've killed them all, basically. So that's the Israeli strategy: is you can't have negotiations if you've killed the opposing negotiating party, which is normally what Israel does. And gets away with it because they have the United States backing them up on that. Now the United States has adopted this type of barbaric savagery, this medieval level sort of diplomacy, if you want to call it that. But this isn't true. The Iranian leadership is intact, but they've stated very clearly on multiple occasions that they're not going to talk to the United States. There are no negotiations because the U.S. has already burned those bridges. By using previous negotiations, which were done in good faith by the Iranians, as cover for a sneak attack. So they've said that. Arachi has said that. I don't know how many times he said that in the last couple of weeks publicly, at least like 20 times. So that would be what the president should repeat if he's being honest to the American people, saying that, look, we want to talk, but the Iranians have said that there's going to be no talks with the U.S. because we burned them so bad in the past, and that they're going to settle this on the battlefield, or when they're happy that their security, interests have been satisfied in Iran, then it will come to an end. It's not going to be through negotiations. I've not heard a U.S. leader say this, You see, because they do not know how to sell that to the American people or to a Western audience. That a supposedly weak, lesser power is dictating the terms, for the settlement at the end. Now, you can argue about whether Iran's going to be successful in those terms. That is an open question. This is open for debate and discussion, and it's an answer that we won't get immediately either, because this looks like this is going to be a long, drawn-out drama that could take place over weeks, over months, who knows, maybe years. It could simmer down, and it could reignite again once the U.S. and Israel have rearmed, which is what they did 8 months ago anyway. After this 12-day war, so this could be a part of a similar cycle here, but the U.S. cannot admit to the world that somebody else is dictating terms. It just can't. The fact that Iran's even doing this or attempting to do it is really a big challenge to U.S. authority, to U.S. hegemony in the region. And if you look at how the Gulf states and their so-called allies in the region are in total disarray at the moment, and also torn between people within countries like Saudi Arabia and even the UAE and Bahrain and other countries that are basically saying, actually, no, U.S. bases are posing a direct risk to an existential risk to us, existing as countries, even, not to mention damage to our trade, our markets, our energy, etc. They're making those statements at the same time. So there's not even a consensus or a unanimity within the Gulf states of whether they're going to be leaning heavy towards the U.S., their traditional ally, you could say, meant to protect them, or they're going to lean away from the U.S. as a potential risk of hosting U.S. bases, and what that means to their relationship across the Gulf to an Iran right now that, yes, you could say on paper that it's weak, but the fact that Iran is still fighting after 4 weeks in dictating terms and managing the Straits of Hormuz, that doesn't look like it's very. You can't say Iran is losing. It's not a clear designation. I think, if anything, it's probably this conflict is in a type of a stalemate at the moment of escalation on the escalation ladder, which we'll see what happens. But those factors you said before, Nima, are the important ones, which is there's not infinite resources for the U.S. in terms of armaments, in terms of munitions, for the Israelis in terms of Iron Dome, Patriot missile interceptors, U.S. interceptors, anti-aircraft. This is a finite resource, as are having a full package of naval attack groups, strike carrier groups, all this air-to-air refueling, the logistics that goes with that. This is not infinite. You cannot continue doing this. This is not George Orwell's continuous war against East Asia. It's not going to work. So they have a finite timeline. The United States does. Trump himself has a shorter timeline, which is the political timeline. Israel has a finite timeline, and Netanyahu has a very short timeline, political timeline. He has to declare results, or they have to draw a line under this, or surrender or declare victory or whatever. They have to do it in a very short space of time because they're in danger of collapse politically in Israel. The Netanyahu regime is in danger of delegitimization by his own hand, as is Trump as well with the upcoming midterms. Compare that, Nima, to Iran's timeline. Is Iran working on a short timeline, or are they working on a very long timeline? I would say they're working on a very long timeline. So if this is a war of attrition, I probably am not going to bet against Iran at this stage. By the same token, I never betted against Russia with the proxy war in Ukraine, because it's a similar type of dynamic. The public appetite for an unpopular war is limited. You have a limited window to achieve your military or political objectives if you're the West, if you're the U.S. That was true in Ukraine with that proxy war, and this is true here. In a way, the U.S. is using Israel as a type of a proxy, but what they're doing is a fake tag team wrestling act. Good cop, bad cop. We're talking with the Iranians, says Trump on Truth Social. And then As soon as he says that, the Iranians say 2 hours later, no, 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 we're not talking with him. And then an hour later, Israel strikes energy infrastructure. And the U.S. says, oh, we had no idea Israel was going to do this. I mean, wow, Netanyahu, we need to have a talk with him. He's being very naughty. Yep. And we're supposed to believe that there's no coordination between these two staunch allies. It's just not credible at this point. Anybody that still believes that these are two separate actors and they're not working absolutely in concert with that, and I think Israel is leading. I think Israel is definitely leading the pace in this tag team act. But I will say, Nima, this reminds me a lot of the Suez crisis on many different levels. Not least of all because during the Suez crisis, the British and the French were teaming up with the Israelis to attack Egypt and retake the Suez Canal, but they were doing it with a fake tag team. They had secret agreements, which were later exposed. The Sèvres Agreement was a secret pact between the French, the British, and the Israelis, where they'd use Israel as the lead attack dog and pretend to restrain Israel while they, maneuvered their sort of British and French assets into position to ultimately checkmate Egypt. But unfortunately, it didn't work because between the United States and the Soviet Union, they moved in to support Gamal Abdel Nasser at that time in 1956, and why this is significant in terms of historical comparison, Nima, is because the Suez Crisis marked the end of the British Empire and the end of the British domination in the Middle East and Central Asia, and where the United States then took over the role of the sort of lead superpower that had custodian stewardship over the region. And I think what's happening now with the Straits of Hormuz is very similar to the Suez Canal in that sense, where we could be watching a change in the world order where the United States is losing its hegemonic dominant position in the Middle East that it has enjoyed since 1956. And we're watching the end of an era here. Who takes over that role? That is a whole nother question and a whole nother debate. But I would venture to think that this would increase perhaps China's involvement and Iran itself as a regional hegemon. And who knows what will happen as a result of this, whether Pakistan's role will also increase in terms of the security architecture of the Persian Gulf, providing some kind of support for the Iranians. But again, these are all open questions. But I will say that in both cases, Suez and the current war we're seeing right now, I think we're seeing a procession, a change in the global order is in progress because of this conflict. And for the similar reasons that started for similar reasons. And it's been executed in a similar way. And the debacle, the failure, if it is going to be a failure by the U.S. and Israel, they haven't learned some of their lessons from history. If you really look at the dynamics of the Suez crisis, which could be a whole nother discussion. We could do a whole show on that.
I think Iran has adopted the Russian strategy in Ukraine, which would be no ceasefire until we reach all our objectives. And this is literally what we've heard so far various times from the Iranian officials. And how do you see the role of Arab countries in that scenario? Are they going to, because right now we've learned that Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, they are gathering, they want to make some sort of unified forces against Iran. But this is not going to happen in anytime soon. So how do you see Iran, the way that Iran is approaching, Iran is putting out its objectives?
First of all, I do see talk of, and most of this is goading, by the way. This is goading from the West and from Israel. They're trying to goad the Gulf Arabs in the media, basically, in the political space, saying that, well, Iran, they may have had the Gulf countries on their side before, but after what the Iranians have just done, then it just doesn't make any sense why the Iranians have turned the Gulf states against them, and they could join the fight against Iran. I highly doubt that the Gulf states are going to join any kind of military action against Iran for the simple reason is that that would basically give Iran the green light to start demilitarizing Saudi Arabia, demilitarizing the UAE, and Kuwait. It's just a U.S. base, as is Bahrain. And I don't know if I've left
Iran
anybody.
doesn't need to go to Kuwait. Iraqi resistance go there.
Yeah, it's not a real country anyway. So that would be the death knell for the Saudi regime. They'd be finished. I mean, they might even be finished already. Time will tell. So yeah, it's just not credible. And also, look, Saudi Arabia, in their infinite wisdom, when MBS was the defense minister, when he was like 32 years old, and the Obama administration convinced Saudi Arabia to go to war with Yemen in 2015. And they fought that for 7-8 years. How did that end up for Saudi Arabia? They couldn't even beat the Houthis. And this is before Yemen had developed the type of fighting units that they've had in the last couple of years and had developed missiles and drone tech. And they still could not subdue Yemen. Saudi, with a modern, full-blown American military, with U.S. military personnel basically running the war for them, and they couldn't beat the Yemenis. So what makes you think Saudi is going to put up any kind of credible fight against Iran? It's just laughable even to think about it. As soon as the Iranian missiles land on and take out Saudi's Air Force and a couple of their main bases, you will see so many people fleeing that country, going off to wherever they're heading, to Paris, to Miami, off to Montreal, off to London. That's where, south of France, that's where the Saudis are going. And whoever's going to stay, I mean, it would be the end of the regime. Now, that raises an interesting question, Nima, which I think we spoke about before. Is this part of the master plan, is to weaken and ultimately achieve regime change? I'm sure the United States and Israel might be entertaining that possibility. Maybe Iran might benefit from that as well. We'll see. But that's, to me, a natural consequence of what we're seeing now. If the Qatari regime cannot extract any meaningful profits out of their gas sector for the next 5 years, I don't think there's going to be a royal family there in 5 years, quite frankly. I don't think there's going to be much of anything in Qatar in 5 years. I mean, where's the money coming from? It's not going to be from tourism. I mean, I just can't see how these Gulf states are still towing the U.S. line after what's happened in the last 4 weeks. If they're that incompetent and they don't have the courage to stand up to the United States after the last 4 weeks, then I think they're toast. I honestly, I don't think there's a future for them. They're not accountable to their populations anyway. And there's not much of them in the Emirates or Qatar anyway. How many native Qataris are there living in Qatar? What is it, 200,000? How many Emiratis live in the Emirates? 300,000? And the other 4 million or whatever are all foreigners. Slave labor, management class, retail class, financial class, all foreigners, all from the U.S., from Europe, from the Far East. There's no Emiratis there, and there's no Qataris in Qatar. So, what are you dealing with here? What exactly are these countries other than glorified U.S. outposts and maybe tax-free offshore havens for lots of money laundering and other sort of offshore finance? I mean, that's kind of what they are. That's not really the basis for a real country. And having no independent foreign policy, not even able to stand up for your own basic interests, that doesn't bode well for your future long term. So that they should be very worried the longer this war goes on, that and the fact that their energy infrastructure and economies are going to be damaged to a degree they're not going to be able to flex or to show the type of largesse that they're used to, which is very inefficient. It means that you've got more money than you need. So you're able to do things that normal countries wouldn't be able to do because you wouldn't have to think about doing it. You can make mistakes like build the line in Saudi Arabia, which is this futuristic wall city that runs through, and Neom, a concept city. You're able to do this stuff because you've got more money than you know what to do with, and you're not really accountable. It's just like the king has a vision. MBS has a vision. Let's all get on board with his. He's so forward thinking. This MBS, that's basically Saudi Arabia. This is. I don't think this is going to happen anymore in the region. I think the region has changed now in the last month. I don't think it's ever going to go back to this fairy tale land of fake civilizations in the desert that are completely unsustainable, both environmentally, both economically, and politically. That's the reality, and Iran has exposed this. And so you either get on board with reality in the Gulf, or I think they're finished. Eventually, they're going to be gone. It might take a year or two, maybe 3 or 4 or 5, but I don't think you're not going to see these same regimes in the future at the current pace, unless they adapt to the new reality. Then maybe they have a chance to survive.
Patrick, we had, a new assassination in Iran. A scientist, a university professor was assassinated by Israelis. And many people in Iran are arguing that if Israel continues with this sort of concept, we have to kill an entire building of researchers who are related to Israeli military. And this is something getting so sensitive in Iran. And if Israel continues with this sort of understanding, these sort of, attacks on Iranian civilians, these are not people, university professors, these people are mostly academics. But how do you see, because in a long-term strategy on the part of Iran, and what would be the solution? Because these people they assassinate each and everyone they decide to, the Netanyahu administration, as you've mentioned before, they're bragging about assassination. They're bragging about all these, heinous acts on their part.
It's beyond the pale at this point. Israel has proven to the world that it is a despicable criminal regime, and the level of savagery and absolute barbarism that's on display. I mean, just basically, we're going to kill an entire apartment block of people to get one academic or one scientist because we want to take out the intellectual leaders in STEM fields in Iran because they might be helping with the civilian nuclear power program. And therefore, we're justified in killing an unlimited number of women and children around them. And we'll call it collateral damage, and we don't care because we are Israel. And this kind of ethno-supremacist mentality that is the same. You see the same type of sort of barbaric, racist, violent state terror. And just look at Gaza. Look at the hellscape of Gaza. That's a direct result of this same criminal, murderous, genocidal mentality that is the problem with the state of Israel. Okay, and the problem, as well as the United States, supports this. The U.S. backs it. They endorse all of these actions by Israel because they themselves share the same values as Israel. It's very deeply held, racist, anti-Muslim, anti-Arab, anti-Middle Eastern, anti-Central Asian. And this is just, to me, if you really step back and look at it, not much has changed since the colonial era. And quite frankly, we go back further, not since the Crusades. It's unfortunately the same mentality. It's the Eurocentric, racist, ethno-supremacist, and they dress it up with religion in order to, sell that they're somehow better, when in fact they're carrying out the most heinous crimes against humanity on a daily basis. I mean, look at what the Israelis are doing in Lebanon right now. Nobody cares. Nobody has a word to say about them. They can just kill, maim, plunder, genocide their way through the entire region. And nobody has the courage in Europe to stand up. No government saying, "No, we're going to sanction Israel now," because let me tell you, if enough countries started sanctioning Israel, you would start to see things wind down pretty quickly. Let me tell you, but they don't have the courage to do that for various reasons. Either they're being co-opted, bribed, blackmailed, who knows. But the results are pretty clear to see. And the other unfortunate part about this is that, well, it does demonstrate that Iran is prosecuting their war differently. From the beginning of this conflict, and then we could go back to the 12-day war, we can go back to True Promise 1, 2, 3, 4, whereas Israel attacks civilians with impunity, brags about it. When Iran retaliates, they've always done so in a very measured way. And to avoid civilian casualties, because Iran's been vocal and very clear their fight is not against the people, but against the regime, the government, and the source of the aggression, which is from the military and the intelligence and defense establishments in Israel and in the U.S. But unfortunately, the U.S. don't have the level of honor to reciprocate in kind. So they're quite happy to just ignore the rules of war. I mean, you even have a sort of psychotic U.S. Secretary of Defense who has self-styled himself as the Secretary of War in a type of DC comic, cartoonish way. He's basically saying we need to get rid of the, quote, stupid rules of engagement so that our warfighters can implement maximum lethality, right? We need to unshackle our warfighters. So they don't even call their soldiers anymore. I mean, even the Nazis even the Nazis still called their soldiers. But the U.S. is rebranding their soldiers to warfighters. That was even a bridge too far for Goebbels. That's how far gone the American administration and the military establishment is at the moment. They're so out in their own sort of delusional fantasy land. And they think they can bomb and kill their way to victory right now, because that's the only discernible strategy coming out of Washington. They're bragging about how many people they've killed, how much deprivation they've caused. The same with Cuba. We're so proud of the fact that we've starved the Cubans and their hospitals aren't running. We've really shown them a lesson. We've shut down all their hospitals and people are dying in the corridors. And it's been a great success, says Trump. It's been a great success. We're winning in Cuba. Look at this famine, starvation. We're winning. It's just deranged, depraved. This is the low point in American history right now. This president is the worst U.S. president in history, by far, in the history of the country. And he has brought the country into such dishonor and disrepute. And unfortunately, he's surrounded by cowards, Democrats and Republicans in Washington, that are afraid to restrain him because they might hurt their own stock portfolios, because they're all getting rich off this. Trump himself and his inner circle are placing bets on the price of oil. Look at the S&P stock market. It goes up when Trump tweets, "Oh, I've done a deal with the Iranians. We're having talks." He did yesterday. Total lie, because the Iranians came back at noon and said, "No, what the hell is he talking about?" And so the market went up when Trump put his truth out. What he calls truth is so stupid. Truth Social is basically a platform for lies and propaganda. But Trump puts that out. He knows the market's going to react. All his buddies on Wall Street have already done their call options. And then the market surges $2 trillion in market cap. And then suddenly, Iran's denial comes. And then the market drops $1 trillion in market cap and it crashes. But all his buddies probably put their put options down. So they're making money on the surge of the market and they're making money on the dip. And then Israel goes as well and attacks Iranian infrastructure when Trump and Witkoff and the fake negotiations team do their usual stick of pretending to be negotiating a ceasefire when all they're doing is running cover for an Israeli attack. Every single time. It's almost, their pattern of behavior is more predictable. I would always bet against them in the same way I would bet against Jim Cramer on CNBC whenever he gives a stock market tip. I mean, always go against Cramer and you'll always do well in the markets. That's the old adage. The same with these two Israeli operatives. And quite frankly, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, what are they but glorified Israeli operatives who probably should register under FAR as foreign agents? And those are our head negotiators for the Middle East. That's a bit of a problem. Do you think they have a conflict of interest between American interests and Israeli interests? I think that's a legitimate question at this point.